studio today, and I just wanted to show a little demonstration or a little I don't know, I felt like doing some really expressive mixed media kind of painting today, and I thought it would be interesting if I videotaped it for you guys to show you a bit of my process and to talk you through the, what I'm thinking about and how I approach a really loose multi-mixed media kind of artwork, and why I think it's really important to learn how to paint like this and how to, I guess, embrace mistakes and happy accidents and just play with materials and paints and all sorts of different things. It's really, I think, important to do this to help loosen up. While there is definitely a place in this world for beautiful, realistic, fine art paintings, there is definitely a place for that. Me personally, I prefer artworks that are really textured and really interesting, expressive, lots of movement and brush strokes and things happening. And I really want to show you guys how I approach doing that in my studio. So that's what I'm here to do. I hope you find this interesting. I'm going to be working just from a still life with lots of different bits and pieces, and I thought I would bring you along for the journey. So that's all I have to say. Here I go with the video now. In this little video, I am going to be working from life. So I do have a little still life set up in front of me. And I'm going to be working on this mixed media paper pad with a whole different bunch of water-based mixed media. So I don't really remember where I picked up this pad from. It's been in my studio for a while, but it's a heavyweight, I think it's like a watercolor paper. It says mixed media paper, so it's quite a smooth heavyweight paper, and it's pretty sure it's A3 sized. And so on this, I'm going to be using a lot of water-based mixed media. So there's a lot of inks and so pencils, inks, acrylic. These are Jane Davenport brand acrylic paint ink marker things. They've got like a brush tip on them, and the colours are really, really saturated. I have some Caran d'Arche Neo Pastel or Neo Color 2 pastels. So these are the water-soluble pastels. I have a few just general acrylic inks. This one's by Ecoline. I've got some by Atelier, and this one's Dana Rowley. I think that's like a greeny yellow, a magenta, and a blue. And then just some heavy body acrylic paint. That's antique white. A water bottle for some spraying, and then obviously a water bucket and a palette. And the whole purpose of this is to just put stuff down on the paper. So I start by doing a really loose sort of semi-contour drawing. So when I say semi-contour drawing, traditionally contour drawing involves focusing on your subject, staring at your subject, and sort of coordinating your hand and your eye. So as your eye follows around the edges of the subject, your hand should follow what your eye is looking at. I kind of I prefer to do a more modified version of that, where I am looking at my subject, but I do glance at my paper as well. Contour drawing also, traditionally, it's said that you should really keep your pen or your pencil or whatever you're drawing with on the paper the whole time. I prefer to move it around a little bit, but the whole point is that I'm not really trying to get an exact sketch or representation of what I'm looking at. I'm keeping it very loose and really just tracing around the shapes that I can see. This is, again, the Jane Davenport. I forget what they're called. I know they have a specific name. I'll try and link them in the description if I can find them. But they're just ink pens, so you can kind of squeeze them to make more ink come out, to make obviously thicker marks, but I'm really just sketching in the shapes that I can see in this little vase of flowers in front of me, and trying not to worry too much about making it perfect. These sort of mixed media paintings, they're really built up over a lot of layers. So the first few layers are just getting marks down, getting a feel for the subject, creating the composition and some shapes. But really the whole point is to not think or worry about it too much. It's you're meant to make mistakes. The fun involved is making mistakes and making it not perfect. So, you can blend things around. I'm just literally squeezing ink right out of the bottle here. Again, because these are all water-based inks, I can mix around with water and spread the inks around. And it's just about having some fun and the process of putting down colour without worrying too much about the final result. You know, you may do these and, you know, hate everything that you're doing. That doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point isn't the end result. The point is the process and the journey of actually creating this artwork. This is also a really fun thing to do if you have just purchased some new materials and you don't really know what you can do with them yet. You don't know how to use them yet or what kind of effects you can get with them. Doing something really loose and expressive like this, you can explore and play and experiment with your materials and kind of work out how you want to use them and what you want to do with them. So these neo pastel, I keep calling them neo pastels. I think they're neo colours, not pastels, even though they are like a water-based wax pastel. But anyway, the neo colour twos, I don't really know how to use them yet for me and the way I create art. So at the moment, I'm kind of just using them more like drawing tools and as crayons, but I know that once you activate with them with water, you can layer them on top of each other, but I haven't really worked out how I want to do that yet. So at the moment, I'm just kind of sketching with them, and then as I add water later on, they sort of blend and smush together. But yeah, the whole point is that you get to sort of play around with your materials in maybe non-conventional ways and see what happens. You know, what happens if I put this here? What happens if I add water to it? What happens when I put this on top of that? Just a way of playing with your materials and discovering new ways of doing things. So now that I've added this base of inks and pastels and stuff on there, I'm just introducing a bit of acrylic paint because I want to sort of cover up the rest of this paper and create a bit of a interesting surface to then add another layer on top of it. So I'm using this is antique white. I've actually been using a lot of antique white lately. I used to be 100% a titanium white fan, but lately I've been using this warmer antique white and I'm really liking the effect that I get with it. And it blends colours really nicely too. Anyway, I'm just using it to block in some of the paper that hasn't been covered yet and get some negative space happening and some negative shapes sort of happening with the paint so that I can dry this layer and then come back to it once it's dry, because not everything can happen in one layer. When you're using these kind of wet medias like acrylic sort of paints and inks and things, if you just keep layering and layering and layering while everything's wet, it's just going to end up a big mushy mess. So everything's going to smush and blend in together. So you need to dry it. So you can see here that, I don't know if you noticed, but that quick little flick over, this paper is now completely dry. I blasted it with my hairdryer. And so now that it's totally dry, I can come in with another layer. Now, if I was trying to do this while it was all wet, then this blue that I'm putting down would be all mushed and smeared into that yellowy colour, and you'd kind of lose a lot of the definition and interest. So yeah, it's always good to just get some stuff down, dry it off, come back to it in a minute once it's dry and keep working. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just emphasising some of the leaf shapes and playing around. And yeah, so I ended up doing quite a few of these. So I'm going to just speed up this one and fast forward it in a minute because I have a lot to show you. I have 2 more paintings that I did in this same technique. So I don't want this video to go for several hours. So I am going to speed it up and I will be back to talk a little bit more in a minute. Right, I finished one painting. I think that one took me maybe 20 minutes at the most, maybe half an hour. You know, you don't want to spend ages on these little quick mixed media sketches. The whole purpose of them is to just get stuff down and experiment and play. And once you got to a point where you're happy, toss it to the side, get another one. So this time I changed up the orientation. So I'm going to go for a bit more of a portrait orientation with this one, but I'm starting with the same process. I'm just doing a really quick contour drawing. This time I'm doing a contour drawing with the Neo color instead of the ink, just to change it up and see whether it works better doing these first. And yeah, it's the same process though. I'm just going to slowly build up different layers, and I'm working really quickly. So you can see this part isn't sped up at all. This is how quickly I'm sketching. I'm looking at the vase in front of me and I'm tracing around the shapes and the contours that I can see really quickly, and really not worrying too much about details. You know, most of even this like shadowy scribble that I'm putting in, it's just an indication of where the shadow is. These leaves are just indications of where the leaves are, because as you saw in the other one, I will be layering a lot on top of this. So I'm not going to be too precious about where everything is. I just want to get, you know, an indication and an idea down for what I'm doing. And yeah, so as I was saying before as well, it's really important to experiment and do things in different ways. So the first time I did this, I laid down with the ink first. This time I'm laying down with the pastel first. Maybe you could sketch it out with paint on the brush first and then layer the inks on top and the crayons on top. Just play around with different ways of doing it and different combinations, different sequences, you know, because that's how you discover what works and how you discover your style and what you enjoy doing and how you can be expressive in your way, which is something that I get asked a lot. I'm always asked by people, you know, I want to be as loose and expressive as you. I want to learn how to just put things down and paint without thinking about it, without worrying too much. Well, this is how you do it. You do it by spending time in your studio with your materials and playing, and not worrying about whether this is going to be a finished artwork that is sellable or that other people are going to like, or that, you know, this is going to be the artwork that changes my art style or puts me in a direction or makes me famous. Don't worry about all that. That stuff's, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. What you need to do is just focus on what you enjoy doing and what feels good for you and what you like to see. And if it doesn't work, so what? Toss that piece of paper aside, pick up another piece of paper and do it again. And that's how you create looseness. That's how you create an expressive style of painting. Anyone that paints in this way, I can tell you right now, spends a lot of time just scribbling, making messes, working, whether it's in sketchbooks or loose sheets of paper or, you know, rough canvases or old canvases, and painting over them. The artists that have this expressive loose style practice at it. They practice being loose, because something that I tell a lot of my students in my classes is that how do I phrase it? I can't remember what I say now. Something along the lines of, you know, painting loose and expressive, it's not random. Even though it's quite loose doesn't mean random. And in order to get that balance between, you know, painting something that's representational but also expressive, you need to practice and you need to learn to see things and interpret them in a loose and, you know, fresh way. I don't know if I'm getting that across properly. I swear I say it a lot better in my classes. Anyway, the whole point is that you want to keep doing these over and over and over and really playing with them and having fun with it. And yeah, that's all I can really say. So I really liked this. I liked the layout of this one much better than the first one. The first one, I don't know, I didn't really like the way that it ended up being, which is why I picked up another piece of paper and just left that one to the side and moved on. So I was much happier with the composition of this one. I think this particular bouquet that I've got in front of me, which is just fake flowers, they're not even real flowers, they're a little fake floral display that I picked up from Target. But I think that the way that these flowers are laid out, it works a bit better in this sort of portrait orientation. So yeah, and I was already seeing that was getting a bit, you know, too representational here as well. So I do start to sort of messy things up a little bit. Don't be afraid to mess things up and paint over something. That's another thing that will really help you loosen up and create a more expressive style, is by letting go of what you've done and painting over something. You know, I recently posted a little video on my Instagram feed of me painting over one of the paintings that I did a few YouTube videos ago. It was a little still life with some ducks, little wooden duck in a vase, and I painted that a while ago, and at the time I was quite happy with it, but once I'd looked at it for a while, I realised that it had served its purpose. I'd learnt the lesson that I had to learn from that painting, and so I painted over it, and I showed a little clip of me painting over it. And I got a lot of comments from people saying, "Oh, you're so brave," and "Gosh, you know, I could never do that." But really, that's the only way to learn. Sometimes you have to let go of something, even if you really like it, or if it's, you know, there's parts of it that you like, but it's not working as a painting, or, you know, there's just something wrong with it. Why hold on to it? You're better off painting over it and starting again, taking the lesson that you learnt from that and putting it onto another new artwork and just moving on. It's just paint. And I know that based on my experience of painting for so many years, that I know that I can paint that again. I can, you know, create that again if I want to. So, and it doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same. You know, I know I can do it again if I want to. But I didn't like it. It wasn't really the message or the style or as expressive as I wanted it to be. So why hold on to that canvas? I may as well paint over it and repurpose that canvas into another artwork and push myself a little bit further along in this journey. So I did have a lot of people, you know, panicking and saying that, you know, gosh, they could never do that. And I say to them, well, why not? Why can't you do that? What do you think is going to happen if you paint over something that you've already done? You know, unless it's an artwork that you are really attached to and you absolutely love and you think is perfect, then of course, you know, you don't need to paint over that. But if it's an artwork that, you know, you have painted, yes, you've dedicated time, you've dedicated materials and effort, and sometimes it can be really frustrating when at the end of that, you're left with something that you don't love. And you kind of think, well, if I just paint over it, then that was a waste of time. Everything I just did was a waste of time. It was a waste of materials. Instead of thinking of it that way, think about it in a way that you have learnt from that. And by painting over it and creating something new, what you have learnt, you know, pushes you forward into the next part of your painting. So why hold on to it? So that's the same with these little studies as well. Just because, you know, you've done something that you like doesn't mean, you know, if a part of it's not working, you need to let it go. And that process of painting over and letting go of certain areas is really going to help push you into a direction where you are not so precious about what you're doing. Once you trust yourself and you know that, you know, you can paint this again, then that's where interesting things start to happen, and that's where you start to learn. And yeah, that's my little words of wisdom. So yeah, actually, back to this painting, I was really happy with it at this stage. But I kind of, again, I wanted to fill out some of these little white spaces a bit more, so I mixed up a bit of pink paint and started painting on that. This ink is still wet though, which I kind of realised after a few minutes of painting, so then I decided to dry it off and come back and keep painting in a minute. But I'm going to stop talking for a minute and I'm going to let you guys watch me finish painting this painting, and I will also show some close-up shots of it when I'm done. third time is a charm. This was the third painting that I did, following exactly the same steps as last time. I really preferred, I really liked drawing with the pastels instead of the ink, so I think I sort of started doing that again, and I kept rotating the vase that I was using as reference as well, just to keep getting different angles. But I really liked the colour combination that I was using as well. I did introduce a bit of green paint just to sort of mix it up a little bit, but yeah, same process as before, just really loosely sketching in semi sort of contour drawing to establish where everything's going to go, and then just building up layers from there, drying the layers in between. And I was really enjoying this. This is a really fun process. And even though I'm doing a still life in this particular example, you could still definitely do any other subject matter. This technique, I've used this for portraits, landscapes, flowers obviously, but even just still life like pots and cups and fruit, anything like that. You can really do this sort of, starting with contour drawing and, painting over it process with anything. And it's really fun. And I hope that you guys give it a go because, it's just one of my favourite ways to really loosen up and create some interesting artworks with lots of colour and texture and interest. And it also introduces a lot of randomness, like even just like that spraying the water bottle onto the paper. The ink will spread and blend, and it creates really interesting splatter marks, and it just makes the artworks so much more interesting to look at and to look closely at, and it gives them so much more character and interest, which is really what I'm looking for in my art. And, you might be looking for something different in yours, but I'm looking for, textures and interest and happy accidents and something that's a little bit more interesting than just a standard realistic painting. I want something that has, I don't know, I don't have the words for it. Pizzazz. That's a good word. Let's use that word. So that's what I'm looking for in my artworks. And I find this technique really helps me get that and create these really interesting paintings and studies and, Anyway, I had a lot of fun doing this. I really recommend you guys having a go at doing it as well. And you can, do a similar sort of setup as this, or you could do something else. It's totally up to you. I also recommend maybe having a go on smaller pieces of paper if you're not quite so confident yet, and work up to larger pieces of paper. Or you can start on a much larger piece of paper and go smaller. So, mix things up. If you're used to working really small, maybe try working large. If you're used to working large, maybe try working small. And just play around with different aspect ratios and things. Maybe work with square papers or, really long, skinny offcuts. Just play around and experiment and have fun. That's the whole point. Art should be fun. At least that's the way I see it anyway. So, this is obviously sped up as well because, again, we're already getting to nearly a half-hour mark with this video. So I thought I'd speed up this last one and, show it in sort of a fast-forward way. I mean, I do paint quickly, but not quite this quickly. Now, the brushes that I'm using as well, these are just really cheap brushes. I get asked a lot which brushes I use. I don't use fancy brushes. They're just, really cheap acrylic brushes. Some of them are, even hardware brushes. I do there is one that I have been using that I really like. It's like a really long flat brush. It has makes some really interesting loose marks. Besides that, mostly just soft acrylic flat brushes. This one here, that's the one I was talking about. See, it has a really long flat point to it. And it's really sort of floppy. I like using that one lately. But any sort of acrylic flat brush is what I tend to use a lot. And they're not very expensive brushes. I don't look after my brushes, so there's no point making or buying expensive ones. Again, play around when you're doing this little project. Play around with different size brushes, different whether they're really thick and scratchy brushes or soft floppy brushes, long ones, skinny ones. Sort of play around and experiment with that as well. And scraping paint or sort of lifting paint off. Just have fun in general, and try and experiment and play around as much as you can. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. This is some close-up sort of video footage of the 3 artworks that I did. So this was the last one that I was painting, and so you can see there's so much layers and interesting bits and pieces happening in these. I was really happy with how these came out. This is the first one that I did. This was probably my least favorite, but usually the first time I do something, it's always my least favorite. That's just the way things are, but it still has a lot of interesting stuff happening and going on. I just didn't really like the composition as much. And this was the other one that I did. So you can see that, you know, so much interest and texture and scribbles, and it's just, yeah, I love it. It's so much fun. And this is how, yeah, they all look together, and they end up being quite a nice little collection usually when I do this sort of process for an hour or two, and I create a few different paintings. Usually I'm always using the same sort of colours in these paintings, so they end up being a nice little collection. So yeah, now I'm going to add these artworks up onto my Redbubble shop and my Society 6 as prints, so especially these top 2 here. So if you're interested in purchasing a print of these, there'll be links in the description to my Redbubble shop and my Society 6, and both those websites are print-on-demand companies, so you can order prints and various things, products and stuff, and they will be delivered directly to you. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining me again on another video. I want to say a special hello and thank you to all my new subscribers lately. Over the last month or so, I've had so many new subscribers. At the time of this video being posted, I'm almost at 10,000 subscribers already, which is amazing. And I'm really glad that you're enjoying my videos, and I look forward to posting a new one really soon. Thanks guys, bye.